Today, I'm chatting with good friend and very impressive Suze Dowling. She's the co-founder and chief business officer of Pattern Brands. Though she might not look it, she has over a decade of experience. She's helped build and scale over 50 brands, pretty much every brand you've ever heard of in New York, besides Care+Wear, of course, which unfortunately we never had the pleasure of getting to
Think of
work with
where
you.
things could be if you
I
had the
know,
pleasure of
I
working
know.
with
It's
them.
not too late, Suze. Just throwing that out there. But including Sweet Greens, Him and Hers, and Warby Parker and Harry's and more. Suze also advises numerous early stage companies, sharing practical insights on growth, team building, and profitability, the famous P word that every entrepreneur loves to talk about these days. So thank you so much for joining me today, Suze.
Thank you so much for having me. And also for the audience, it was very, very painful for him to say that I was impressive. We just need to get that out there and get that on the record. So I'm milking it right now. That and telling me that I look youthful. Thank you.
I mean, both. You are impressive. I do always say that. Actually, a little aside, when we go to our dinners, Suze never likes to give anyone her background. She'll just sit there and be like, "Oh, I'm the co-founder of a company called Pattern," and then I have to force her to be like, "Okay, what did you do before?" And she always gets really squeamish and very upset that she gets called out for having to tell everyone what a rock star that she is.
I think it's just one of those things where I feel like you need to keep building, keep getting better, right? And it's also we're all in the same boat of just building businesses. And like that's where, I don't know, it's so awkward to talk about. Like it's the Australian in me. I feel like we have like tall poppy syndrome in Australia where we don't like to get too big for our boots.
Love that. Um, so let's talk about. So as I mentioned, you've helped launch many brands and grow quite a few from idea to exit. What first drew you to working with early stage companies, and what keeps you, to your point just now, what keeps you excited about building from the ground up?
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't say that I was officially drawn to it. It was one of those things that I didn't necessarily plan to happen. But I always, I guess, have been in some ways drawn to the concept of just 0 to 1, the concept of creating. I'm also a highly opinionated person, and so the idea of getting
Really? You're opinionated?
I
You're
know
pretty
it's
good.
shocking, but it's like the idea of getting to take this raw idea and it's just like a whisper of a concept and then build a foundation that's like a living, breathing business. Like that's still to this day is such a pinch me moment. Like that's like how I get to spend my time. I think with like the early stage business, it's so much of it about like kind of forcing clarity, right? Because there is no like exact playbook, there is no kind of bureaucracy or red tape in most areas of it. It's really about like how do you trust your gut? How do you be really agile by getting some data but not being kind of paralyzed in that pursuit of perfection? And that's just like I don't know, it feeds me. Like I think what kind of keeps me excited all these years later is none of it's the same. I haven't gotten
Yeah.
sick of it because it's always something new, right? Like we're dealing with humans and like we're selling to humans, right? And so you've got to keep up with like, okay, what is happening in the world? What is my customer thinking, feeling, doing, and
That's
growing?
your excuse for why you read TMZ and the New York Post every day, huh?
You know, I actually do love a little like New York Post. Like it'll be like my morning start. I'll start with like reading the Daily Stoic like next to my bed of my like mindfulness for the day and then being like better get on like some Daily Mail and New York Post, you know?
It's interesting that you say
All in the
morning because
mind.
I would have guessed that you would have said that's what you do between the hours of like 1 and 3 a.m. Because for anyone that doesn't know, Suze doesn't believe in sleeping ever.
The
So if you,
irony being, I actually adore sleep. I love
hmm,
sleep. I just also love getting a million and one things done. And so it's always like a constant battle in myself.
got it. Um, cool. Well, so I guess diving a little deeper into that, how has working with so many startups shaped your own approach to entrepreneurship, and what advice would you give to founders just starting out?
I think, I mean, certainly it's shown me that there's no one right way. Like I think going back to the Jen Lane days when we were working with, arguably what have become some of the most amazing entrepreneurs, right? And we met them when they had an idea. And,
Yeah.
we would always say at Jen Lane, we were saying, bet on the jockey, not the horse. And by that, we meant bet on the entrepreneur, bet on their ability to have an amazing vision, but more importantly, figure it out. I think that there's a lot of people that can have an amazing vision out there. It takes a certain kind of type to be able to take that vision and truly execute and really roll with the punches that it takes to build a business of a certain scale. And I think, the common thread across all of those startups was really they weren't chasing, a singular trend. They weren't trying to be, something to everyone. They really were building something for their customer, which allowed them to really understand and method act of like getting in their customer's psyche and make decisions for that customer. And so I think that's really shaped how I operate. I'm not afraid to really narrow in on what is the niche. I always like to take a really strong point of view and be really disciplined, but also when we started Pattern, we really coined this term direct with consumer versus direct to consumer. And it was the concept of this is not just a one way, us pushing out information to our customer. This is really how do we gather their insights and data and really create something that is shaped by them. And so I'd say like my advice for anyone starting out is, like fall in love with the problem and your customer itself, not just your product. Again, you need to make an amazing product. If your product is not good, people are not going to keep coming back again and again and again. But to be really successful, you have to be truly obsessed with your customer, not the category itself. And I think all too often I see, especially in pre-launch, founders go to kind of skip this step of saying, well, I don't yet have a customer, so how can I understand my customer?
Yeah.
And that's really where I think it's probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make because like your job is to find people that may be your customer and really get in and understand, why they're behaving the way
How do
they
you, at the early stages, how do you find that, like, how do you learn about that customer? What are some actions that you've taken
I think
previously to
I
do
think
that?
there's like a few different ways. I think like the mistake people do is just talk to their immediate friends and family. That is a mistake because you're not going to get the reality and you need
Yeah.
people that are going to give you the cold hard truth. So this is where I'd say I like for just doing some smaller customer interviews on the phone, friends of friends of friends. Let's try and
Yeah.
get a couple removed. And again, try and kind of profile with the demographic data that you have to kind of match back there. Two, surveys. This is something where whether you're doing a survey monkey or others, there's so many ways of also being able to kind of mass survey certain demographics that you're able to kind of segment down. And so I always like to think like how can I get on both of those, that's really direct data, right? Like that's me being able to ask a question, get a direct response. Again, I like to peel the onion back. So I always
Hmm.
say, like, we need to go deeper, 5 layers. Why? And that's where we might get to the root of something that actually is really magical as an insight. But then I'm also a really big believer in direct data as well. So I think there's so many things. Like Reddit is a gold mine. Love everything in Reddit.
Interesting.
Go deep into Reddit.
Yeah.
And actually, fun fact, like so many of like top ads will actually be things that we had like got a concept for on Reddit. So I'd say like Reddit is a gold mine.
Hmm.
There's some great tools out there that also aggregate things like a Spark Turo. Really looking at Amazon reviews for competitors. I love a good negative review, and obviously with Amazon, there's everything that's very
All
transparent.
you get on Amazon these days are negative reviews.
But that's again, this is where I'm like, I want to soak that in because I really want to understand like what is the kind of thing that's making this person tick? How am I
Hmm.
solving their problem and how do I get into their mind state? So like one of my favorite books, it's kind of a oldie but a goodie these days, is called Marketing to Mind States. It's really about like how is your customer feeling? And again, how do you then meet them where they are? And so for me, it's like, okay, let me get my direct data, let me get my indirect data, let me now sit and map out my consumer journey. And so in the consumer journey, I'm taking all of the things I've learned and then trying to really drive that into insights about what their mind state is and then how I can meet them where they are based on that mind state to ultimately, bring them down to convert.
Interesting. Um, so I guess to take a step back, and that was all awesome feedback. It actually reminds me in the early days of Karen where I cold called thousands of nurses just to get their
Love that.
opinions on the idea. Because I knew nothing, but I was like, I know the nurses are going to know why people were using a sock on their arms, and so trying to talk to them about what they needed and everything. So I totally agree, although I got flashbacks on the survey aspect of business school and everyone for every class sending you a gazillion surveys. And back then I mean, I would argue we still don't know what we're doing, but back then we really didn't know what we were doing. So you're writing like 5-page surveys, etc., that no one wanted to fill out because your friends in business school, you would fill it out.
Well, look, and I think this is also where I am a big believer in surveys from just a like wealth of data and how do we get to some level of statistical significance. But I
Yeah,
also think that the power and insight that you get from talking to 5 to 10 people is astronomical. It truly is. And I think it's also something, especially in the early days, where you as a founder should be having those conversations. This is not something for you to say, oh, I'm working with a strategic consultant, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. No, like
yeah,
you are getting on the call. You're going to sit there because there's going to be some awkward silences at first. And again, I also believe
totally.
power of silence. I think too often with customer interviews, people are trying to rush through it. And I'm like, no, we're going to sit and we're going to be silent and we're going to let them unfold because that's again where you get to some, really brilliant pearls of insight. And then it's also, this is not one and done. Yes, we're doing this now, but also once we launch, we're going to continue to do
Love
this
that.
because that's again how you really, serve your customer. Like back when we left Gin Lane, we were so excited at the thought because we were like, oh my gosh, we have no clients anymore. This is amazing, the freedom of this.
Ah,
And now I look back and go, oh, how naive you were. Your customer
yeah,
is your client. Now
exactly.
I have so many more clients than I've ever
Right.
had, in my life. And so I think you can't forget that when you're building.
No, I love that. And you started to answer this, but from agency work to launching your own brands to now acquiring them, how has each role changed your view of what it really takes to build a brand that lasts?
Whew. I mean, I think there's some stuff that has stayed constant in that I think we've always believed in the power of, brand strategy and understanding, what your brand DNA is and what you stand for. I think though the evolution probably from Gin Lane to now is at Gin Lane we were also so focused on that first impression. So how
Yeah.
it looked, how it felt, the unboxing experience. What was the story you were telling to the world? And I think then I went through a really steep learning curve, honestly, from going from agency world to then actually being in an operating business because I think I learned, yes, that is a critical foundation, but also that doesn't matter if you don't have the operational engine behind kind of the story you're telling. And so you can have the most beautiful branding in the world, but if the unit economics don't work or the supply chain breaks or the product itself is just not delivering, like you don't have a brand, you actually have a moment. And I
Hmm.
think that's just something that people sometimes forget where they're so focused on one area that they are kind of lopsided in their approach. And then the interesting thing for us at Pattern was so we started out incubating our own brands and then we actually moved into acquiring brands. And
Right.
so that also then made me actually look a little differently again, actually, at kind of how to because it's really how do you put value on brand? Like if you're
Hmm.
acquiring a business, it's you're saying, okay, I'm giving you X, and it's because I think I'm getting this value that I can increase. And so it really made me think a little bit more in terms of the durability. So for me, then it was really narrowing in on, well, what makes a healthy brand? So you can have the brand strategy and the brand foundation, and you can have it look and feel beautiful. You can have a great operating engine of a great product and, strong unit economics. But also it for me then came down to What's the behavior of the customer file? What's the repeat rate? Are we really compounding value? Because I think it really kind of is that evolution of thinking from, a beautiful brand to something that's very structurally sound, but also like informed by data. And it's also, how do you kind of continue to constantly evolve as a brand while still kind of not lose the soul? And I'd say that soul is kind of that brand strategy that, has always remained there.
I love that. As you talk about creating, I guess, the soul of a company and the brand strategy and the brand versus thinking about just the moment, and especially in the early days, how early do you think founders should be getting branding involved? And do you think the product shapes the brand or the other way around?
So there's not a clean cut answer here, I will say. So I think first
Hmm.
thing is almost stepping back and saying, what is brand versus branding? Because I think a lot of the time people interchange those terms and they're
Yeah.
actually so fundamentally different. Because to me, like brand is the soul. Like that's the heart of who you are, right? That's the identity, it's the character, it's the purpose, and that should be like day zero.
Yeah.
That is really, again, more traditionally thinking about things like your brand pyramid. It's thinking about what does your brand do to like, what is your brand promise, right? So for us at Pattern, our brand promise is that we help people enjoy daily life. That doesn't necessarily say anything about the fact we sell home goods. We're saying we enjoy daily life and we break it down into how you think about the micro moments of your day.
Hmm.
Actually, having that strategic foundation has a huge impact then on how I think about my product assortment because I think about everyday use items that are highly functional, that bring joy in doing it. And so you can see the brand informs the product, not the branding informing it. Whereas the branding is kind of what people more traditionally think of as the kind of look and feel of the brand. So what's your brand voice? What's your tagline? What's your logo? Your, visual identity. And I
Yeah.
think that is important, but you should never be doing that before you have kind of that structure of the brand. And so I think to answer your question, I think product does inform the brand, but brand also informs the product. They happen hand in hand. It's two halves of the one whole, right? Because if you're going and doing a brand pyramid and saying what are the technical and functional benefits, you need to actually understand what are you offering this product
Right.
to provide value to the customer. But you also, as you're developing the product, need to think about what is the problem you're solving and what is the emotional payoff that speaks to the brand that you're creating. And so it is this kind of beautiful cycle of these two halves playing together. And I think when you have them play together, that's really how it delivers like such a strong outcome. So I'd say like the product itself is maybe like the source code of things,
Right.
and the brand is like how you translate it to make it matter to people.
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, I think about like when I started the company, we were starting with pick line covers, and I knew from day one that a pick line cover in the grand scheme of things was not a company. It was a product that could help people, and that was our mission was to help everyone with what they wore in and out of the hospital. And so it was as the company grew and evolved and heard about other use cases, we started adding other products that kind of felt that same way to today having things like patient gowns, scrubs for clinicians, uniforms for staff members, etc. So I love that. Um, when you think about, and by the way, I do want to say on this interview, not podcast, I am now a pattern household, so I
Love
really
that.
love everything in my house, my sheets to the towels to storage. Suze saw like a picture, I think, of my apartment and how messy it was and how ugly it was, and the next thing I knew, I had 10 boxes in my apartment to change the whole outlook of it. So lesson number one is become good friends with Suze, and she will take a look at what you have and just improve it drastically.
Does it help you enjoy your daily life?
It does every day.
See, our mission
I
is
sleep
achieved.
more comfortably, I dry off more comfortably, I eat more comfortably, I cook more comfortably. It's great.
Here we are, just changing lives over here.
Literally. Um, besides sales, what signals are most important to you to know that the brand is connecting with people?
So, I mean, I think, look, the sales to me are like a lagging indicator, right?
Hmm.
Really, I look at like what are my leading signals. So for me, certainly, my customer file and my customer file growth, like that is
Yeah.
something that's really important to me. My repeat purchase rate, this is something
Hmm.
where again, I'm like, how do we build that long-term relationship? Again, I want
Right.
to be first purchase profitable. That is very important.
Yeah.
Think about all of the additional margin you get as you build an ongoing relationship. I think also like, looking at things like your word of mouth or your UGC and social sharing that's unprompted, because again, I think it shows that your product is integrating into these people's daily lives and they're kind of going from, being people that are using it to hopefully being advocates for it. And that is something that's I think really special.
Hmm.
Love using a good heat map. So I really like to look, at like what is the scroll behavior on something like a product detail page? Like how are they interacting? Because I think, again, that's telling you something about the relationship that you're building with this customer. And then, of course, like customer service. Again, I think customer service is one of the most important components of building your business. It can
Yeah.
take a negative interaction that they may have had because, of course, there's always going to be some level of like things get lost in the mail or
Right.
something's delayed or whatever, but it can take that and turn it into the most positive, but also they really have a pulse on what's happening with your product complaints, product issues, but also product opportunities, and really like how you can better serve them. So I'd say also for founders, go be in your CX inbox, even as you scale, go really dig around in there. Take some customer service phone calls if you offer phone support, because like that is so helpful. And I'd say also what customers are saying to you in reviews is also incredibly helpful because again, you'll get to kind of the heart of the matter. And I think those are the things combined that you can really say, okay, we are building an authenticity and a resonance here. And that again is like a flywheel that feeds itself.
I love that. From day one, we've had an approach where every member of our team does customer service. And I think that's so important for exactly what you're saying. You get to hear and see what people are saying negative, but to your earlier point, what people are saying that they love also, right? Like it's pretty amazing to hear stories from people of, oh my God, I felt so much better. Or, I mean, I still remember calling someone in the early days and talking to this lady, and she informed me that her husband had passed away. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I had to bring this experience back to you. And she was like, no, actually, this was the one thing he looked forward to every day was wearing the sleeve over his arm. And she ended up actually buying a bunch and donating. So she was our first donor as well. And it was just so powerful and just an important reminder that you want to get to know your customer and talk to them, and you're only going to make better products by hearing feedback from them.
And
Um,
ultimately, I'm like, that's why we do what we do, or should
exactly.
we do what we do. Like we
Yeah.
should be serving our customer, and we're here to kind of partner with them. And again, that's something where this shouldn't just be about saying on a spreadsheet, here's the revenue and EBITDA I want to make. Of course, that is something that
I was going
is
to say, I mean, revenue and EBITDA are nice, but
and it's a foundation, but in addition to that, it also should be
oh,
like how are we serving our customer, especially if we're a D2C brand. Again, the
yeah,
most valuable thing you own as a D2C brand is not your product IP, it's your customer relationship. And I
yeah,
think once you have that, you can have a lifelong advocate, but also if you lose that, that is, a very slippery slope.
it's pretty terrible. All right, a few quick fire questions for you.
Okay, I'm in
Totally
the
off
hot seat.
script here. Probably gonna get yelled at afterwards, but what book are you reading right now?
I just ordered a book that was called How Brands Grow. And it's a two-part series.
Hmm.
Then there's Brands Grow Part 2, which is actually what I'd ordered first, which is really telling you about the philosophy of um, how you develop kind of returning customer revenue and overall lifetime value. And their perspective is, really the more market share you have, the more your returning customer, and lifetime value grows as well, which is in some ways the antithesis of what some other people believe. So it's just interesting to take a read through.
Interesting. What's your go-to drink order at dinner?
I mean, even at dinner, I'm still having a cup of tea. Let's be
Yes, I knew that
real.
was the answer. What type of tea?
English breakfast tea with a splash of skim.
Yep. What's your favorite restaurant in New York?
Oh, that's a hard one. I don't know. I mean, I just like food. I will say I live right by the Odeon, so I am at the Odeon every week. So it's probably my most frequented restaurant.
Honestly, I thought you were
I
going to
love
say
it.
Warren Street Hotel. Now I'm worried that I don't know you that well
I
anymore.
do. I will say I do love Warren Street Hotel too, but I also feel like Odeon is just such an iconic,
Oh, totally.
iconic place that it's also I'm a little lazy. One is 2 minutes from me, the other is 7 minutes from me. That 5 minutes I
That
can be
5 minutes
doing
is clutch
a
time.
lot more things.
Cats or dogs?
I mean, do you need to ask? Cats. For everyone
Obviously,
to know, I have a
I
cat.
felt like we didn't have a buttons reference today, and I needed to make sure
That
that
is.
buttons was included.
I'm actually kind of surprised. Sometimes he'll jump up and join me when I'm doing these things because he
Yeah.
likes to know that he has all eyes on the room on him. But no, definitely. Yeah, I grew up with dogs. I actually grew up with like a lot of dogs. So I do love dogs too, but
Hmm.
Buttons is the love of my
I
life.
guess I should have asked cat, dogs, or kangaroos.
Yeah, no, not a kangaroo
I mean,
person.
a pet kangaroo could be kind of cool. Just
You
throw
know,
them
I
out
actually
there.
grew up with people that did have pet kangaroos. So not no to that, but I think I just want them a little smaller and furrier and can't, beat me up too badly.
Love that. And what are you most looking forward to about this summer?
Oh, honestly, I feel like there's a lot we've been working on with Pattern that's really in like a really good role, so that's lovely. And then on the personal side, taking a trip to Tuscany later in the summer, so that would
Wow,
be
Suze Dowling
lovely.
taking a vacation. You heard it
You've
here
heard it
first.
here. You've heard it here. Let's mark the calendar and make sure I don't back out of it now.
I love that. I'm going to email Jeff and tell him congratulations. You finally got her out of New York.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, Suze, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. This has been awesome. And I'm excited to get this out in the wild.
Thank you for having me.